Welcome to the Early Years Spark podcast. I'm Tati Bueno, and this is my friend and co host.
Konstantina Mustaka. Hello, everybody.
Today is a milestone for us, isn't it?
It is
It's a
a
really
very exciting one
important episode. And why is that?
because we have our first expert guest. Isn't that fantastic?
Oh my God, I'm so excited, you guys. You can't not believe this.
And who is it, Tati? The one, the amazing.
The one and only, the brilliant Clare Stead. She's
Yes.
the developer of the Oliki app, and she's all about brain building in the first 1,000 days. And why is that important?
She's talking a lot about parenting as well. So it's going to be a very, very interesting episode.
With no further ado.
Hello, Claire. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here with you both.
Thank you. You're our first guest on the Early Years Spark podcast, and we're so lucky to have you. Definitely.
Well, I'm incredibly honoured to be a first guest. I don't think I've been a first guest before.
It's always a first time. Now, I'm going to start with just saying a few words about what you have done. And there's a lot you have done in your career in early years, and it's so important as well. So you're an e-learning specialist. Please correct me if anything of this is not.
Absolutely, yes.
You're a researcher and a qualified primary school teacher. You're very passionate about children and enriching their lives through creative, engaging, and active learning. And you have 20 years of both classroom and active-based, research-based educational experience.
Do you know, I think it might be closer to 30, if I'm really honest.
Now
I'm getting really old.
Wow. You don't look old, though.
Oh, thanks.
And then the Oliki app came up, yes?
Yes.
And what I think is I would like you to start with is because I didn't know, but it's actually an acronym, isn't it? Oliki is an acronym.
It is an acronym. Yes, it's an acronym.
And maybe we can mention that. Maybe you can talk to us about.
Absolutely. So the Oliki app, which is an app I've developed for parents from conception to 2 and for nurseries to use in their baby room, is designed to support baby development through tiny playful activities. And when I was naming it, I have to be really honest, it wasn't an acronym. It started its life as I wanted something that was round, that was cozy, that you want to snuggle into, that was friendly, because that was the sort of feeling that I wanted Oliki to have and the ethos that the company would live by. But I also wanted it to be able to get the .com for not a ridiculous price of money. And if you make up a word, which I did, you get it for really quite a cheap amount of money. So that was perfect when I started out. And then every time I met somebody, and I checked, of course, that it didn't mean something in other countries. And the closest is apparently it means olive in Estonian if you take one of the eyes out and do something else and, turn it round and upside down. Anyway, and then I decided that people kept saying to me, and what does Oliki mean? And I thought, what does Oliki mean? It doesn't. But actually, one night, while I was watching my son play squash, it came to me as a blinding inspiration. Actually, what does Oliki stand for? And that's where I started. And I, what is the purpose of Oliki? And I realized actually it is an acronym. So the O is O for observation. So observe closely what your child is doing, what the child in front of you is doing. That's where we're going to start for everything that we do for play for development. The next one is the OL, L for learn what your baby is saying to you. So we start from the baby. So we're observing the baby. The baby is designed and primed to share with us. So we need to learn what that baby is trying to tell us. Next, we're going to investigate their interest. Because when we've got their interest at the core and center of what we are, our engagement with this child, we're going to meet the child where the child is. Then we're going to initiate conversation. So before we even go in and do anything and say anything to this baby or the child, because this works right the way through, obviously, the early years period.
Exactly.
We are working with the child's interest at our core and center. So we don't say anything until we know what they're actually doing. Then, so we've got the O, we've got the L, we've got the double I. Now we get to, I feel like I'm on a sort of spelling contest. Now we get to the K, which is connection. We want to kindle connection. And that kindling of connection is the key for successful development, because it's only in connection that a child is able to feel safe enough to learn and grow and develop. And then finally, we get another I, which is instill a love of learning. Because when we do all of these things together and we work with that in mind in every interaction that we have with a child, particularly with our tiny babies, we literally are building the foundations of this instilling a love of learning for life. So that's what Aliki is: heart, center, whole, everything. And it was developed on a squash court.
Amazing. But it sounds so
Love
much
that.
like what we believe for early years in general, not only for babies, but like throughout.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think it's so important that we take a step back, because we are very much focused on, we've been very focused on developing activities. What are you going to put in the tough tray? What are you going to put in the water? What are you going to do in the garden? What are you going to do on the Play-Doh table? Let's go to Pinterest and find the Pinterest thing that looks lovely, and we will recreate it. But in that process, we lose the baby, we lose the child, whatever age they are. We lose the developmental part of the activity. And so if you come through with an Aliki lens, kind of Aliki your practice, and you will transform outcomes.
Definitely. Strongly agree with you, I have to say.
There we go.
All of this.
It's the end of the podcast then.
No. We have so many things to talk about. So do you want to start by telling us also, like, why are the first 1,000 days so important? For you in general, of course.
So the first 1,000 days is the time from conception to two. It's the time when a baby's brain is literally building its foundations it will be used for the whole of the rest of life and for learning going forward. So if we go the other end of life, when we're finished, whatever finished looks like for ourselves as adults, is built on a set of foundations. And those foundations were built in the first 1,000 days. And the first 1,000 days sets the foundations for every aspect of life. So from our academic success to our mental health, our physical health, diabetes, obesity, and heart issues are the three biggest NHS spends. All have their foundations: diabetes, depression, and heart, all have their foundations in this first 1,000 days period. And it's the time that we are literally building the brain from the ground up. So how it happens is the brain is built during pregnancy. From 4 weeks, it's beginning to sort of merge as a thing from the spinal cord. Over time, and when the baby gets born, the baby is born with their brain, but it's not wired and connected. And it's the wiring and the connection that we are building. The brain is designed to build during this first 1,000 days, and it's wiring it up well in the beginning builds amazing foundations. And if we have gaps in those foundations, it's something that we struggle with for the rest of our life, and we're constantly trying to solve the problem. So our special needs children who, I don't know, the kid who's just like can't sit on the carpet, that would have its roots, that issue would have its roots in the first 1,000 days, quite possibly. And if we'd given them different experiences in these early days, they would have built the foundations on which they could then manage to sit on the carpet and sit effectively and listen. So getting it right in the first 1,000 days sets a child up for success later on, because they can build on these amazing foundations that they've built. That was a long-winded answer.
But it was a good, detailed answer that, for us, understanding why it's so important to look at it so early. So everything I read about you, you're saying that it starts in conception, but most of the time people don't really know when the conception. So when should it start? As soon as we know the pregnancy? And how do would that work?
Okay, so remember there's two things. We're building a baby, but we're also building parents. And some people know, if you're an IVF parent, you know straight away that you're pregnant. And it's never too early to start. In fact, some people say that you should be starting before you become a parent, become pregnant, preparing, because the space that you provide in your womb is the environment in which this baby is growing. When we get that right, we set the baby up for amazing success and foundations and blah, blah, fish cakes, the whole thing. So starting early doesn't mean that we're now trying to teach our babies to hop, skip and jump while they're still in the womb. What we're actually doing is we're setting the foundations for building those foundations and making the environment right. And that means getting parents to begin to think about their role in developing their child, getting parents to understand that they need to understand a little tiny bit about child development in order to be able to understand how to enable their parents, their children to thrive. We used to parent in an environment of community. We used to parent in the street amongst our elders, and those elders used to show us what to do. So when I had my daughter, now 22 years ago, like I told you, I'm old. I came home from hospital, and in those days, you bathed the baby straight away. There wasn't a reason not to bath the baby. And I was home, and my mum came over, and I was really scared to bath this baby because, like, what do you do? And in the hospital, I'd literally taken the baby's clothes off, dipped her in the water, and taken her out again. And I'd been in hospital for 5 days because this was old time ago. My mum came over and she said, "Can I bath the baby?" So of course you can. So obviously I go into and I watched the most beautiful thing unfold. It was extraordinary and delightful to watch as this confident, experienced grandma confidently prepared the space for this baby. She chatted in a loving, nurturing way. The baby was cozy the whole time, enveloped in a towel and snuggliness, dipped in the water, and then she moved the baby backwards and forwards in the water, and then she turned the baby over to enable the baby to have some tummy time, to lift up, to stretch, to develop their neck and back muscles, but also to experience the world in a different way. And she just did it naturally. She didn't even know that she'd done it. I was blown away in so many ways. In this simple maneuver, my mum had both crushed my world, but also it was very beautiful. And the reason she crushed my world was when she turned my baby over, who was now 5 days old, I saw her back for the first time. I'd never seen the back of my baby, which sounds a really weird thing to even notice. But on her back was a great big strawberry nevus. Now, strawberry nevus, for those of you that don't know, is a cluster of unfinished blood cells. They go away by the time they're 5, but they're quite shocking when confronted with them. They're raised and they're very angry red. And this was a big strawberry nevus, taking up a good 1/6 of her back. And I'd never seen it. This baby had been in the world for 5 days. I'd never seen. She wasn't perfect, first of all, and I felt a complete failure that I had never seen this before. I didn't know that my baby had this. And then the realization that I'd never seen the back of my child for 5 days. And then I realized the reason was I didn't know how to turn my baby over in the water. I wasn't confident enough to do that. So I learned how to do that by watching my mum manipulate the baby. And the next time, I was absolutely confident to do it. But we're not parenting in that way anymore. We don't have our elders to show us what to do. So we are learning through guesswork, through YouTube videos, through Pinterest, through hoping, through trying to be kind, but not really knowing why we're doing stuff. And in the olden days, like when I grew up, all those years ago, I used to play in the street with the 12-year-olds when I was 2. And 12-year-olds didn't know how to care for babies. They just picked you up and dragged you along, and you did all the things, and off you went together. You bundled along as a bundle of kids. And you were given these experiences that our children are not having now. So now it's about helping parents understand the role that they need to play in this development and the role that plays in their development. But it's also about getting our practitioners who have not grown up in this way to understand the impact and power of play for development. Because if we don't understand that, and if we're not planning for development, we're planning for play. When we're planning for play, we plan activities. We don't plan to enable that child on that day to develop the next set of skills they need in their developmental path in order to thrive. Does
Wow.
that make sense?
Absolutely.
So then if we're starting with the parents and explaining how to connect and why play is so important, can you then expand on that? Because we've been having chats with parents, especially preschool parents that go see school for the children to go on reception, and we hear that, oh, all they do is play. I don't want I don't want my child to play at school. I want them to learn. But we know that play is learning. Can you expand on that for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's our failing. It's us as educators failing. And when I was training, I don't know whether I went to a really harsh university, but they would say to us whenever we came back from practice, we go, oh God, the children were dreadful. I hated my day. It was so awful. And we'd all be wallowing in this sort of dreadfulness. And they'd say, what did you do wrong? And it always comes back to what did you do wrong? And what we are doing wrong is we are not taking our professionalism seriously enough to be able to say, I know my craft, and our craft is not play. Our craft is child development. And if we don't know the developmental processes and steps that our children need to go through and how play enables that, play is our tool to make that development happen. And it is our job to articulate our knowledge professionally to parents, and to also articulate to parents that their role is a big part of this. If you think about a child in full-time nursery education, the parents still have them 80% of the time. So they play a massive role in the development of the child. And if a child comes to you in the month in which in the term in which they turn 9 months old, they have already had 18 months of the 33 months of the first 1,000 days at home. So that's more than half of the first 1,000 days have already gone before the time they come into your setting. So we have to use that time before they come in to support their parents, to support their development, and to show the parents that they are part of the journey. When we articulate to parents successfully the power of play, and we say to parents the importance of them playing a part in this from the very beginning, and the fact, I mean, the statistic that children's development at 22 months old is an excellent predictor of academic outcomes at 26 years old is a frightening statistic, but it also focuses the mind. It means by the time they leave your baby room, we know roughly where they're going to be as a predictor for 26 years old academically. So if we go back then and we say, well, parents just think it's play, that's because we're not telling them. We're not giving them the tools that help them understand, which is why I built the Aliki app, because the Aliki app is literally saying to them, do you know what? You know you're singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Top job. Do you know why this is a top job? Here is the scientific evidence behind why what you're doing is an amazing thing. Here is the evidence behind the activity that you're doing that shows how this activity, this tiny activity of singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, builds the foundations for the rest of life going forward.
And you mentioned that one part of Oli is initiating conversations with babies and children in general. Can you tell us more a little bit about what does quality interaction looks like for you, and why is it important?
Yeah. So quality interaction, again, this goes back to getting the parents involved. If we don't give them the tools, which is why Aliki starts from, well, one of the reasons Aliki starts from conception is designed for parents, although practitioners are using it, You know, if we give it to the hands of every parent when they come into our setting, we're giving them the tools to build the foundations on which we can develop later. And conversations with babies start while they're still in the womb. So it is those internal chats that you have with the baby tucked in your tummy. Are they nice things that you're saying to both you and the baby, or is it actually just a, oh baby, you're gorgeous, yeah, I'm a loser, look at me, I'm so fat, I'm so ugly, this is so horrible? That is all the same environment in which your baby is growing up. So that's one thing. What is the internal dialogue with you and yourself and you and your baby? What is the external dialogue? What's the diet of language that this baby is hearing while still in the womb? What is the music that they're hearing? It's the partner that will be involved, if there is going to be a partner involved. Are they having dialogue and conversation with the baby while in the womb? Because research shows, there's some Finnish research that was done about sounds that the baby was given. Some babies were given ta 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 ta, and some given different sounds. And then when they came out, those babies preferred that sound. And again, they've done that with song as well. It's a well-known research. And so that connection is the first part of the development, because when we have attachment and connection, the baby feels safe and secure. When they feel safe and secure, they are able to develop going forward. Because the brain feels safe enough to give its space to, rather than staying safe, to now learning the new things. So we are helping the parents understand that conversation starts in the womb. And then what we need to explain is that we don't want to tamper the language. We want to use nice, rich, experiential language, because then we are giving the children a diet of really great language. So when you're telling a story at the dinner table in the evening, your baby's hearing that even when they're in the womb. So that's really important. Then when the baby arrives, it's about starting with the face, getting connected face to face. Babies spend a long time looking at eyes, and then eventually they start looking at the mouth, and they go back up to the eyes. They are learning about the shape of the face, where you begin, where you end. Those conversations need to be face to face. So if you now are doing this and you're looking at your phone, you have what's called still face, because when we are looking at a phone, we don't use our expressions. Babies want and need to see the expressions in order to be able to read those expressions, to learn more about the face. When we put them in front of televisions, they can't really get much information from it. And when we are behind a screen, they can't read we're sort of blanking ourselves out. So that's another form of conversation. So it's not just the language, it's also the body language and the facial expression that's also really important. And babies do a lot of lip reading, they do a lot of eye looking, so they're gaining information. But then take that into the nursery setting. When did we last in our baby rooms get face to face with a baby, one-on-one, for a long period of time? And by long, I mean 5-10 minutes. When did that become an outcome that we were looking to do? Because if babies learn in that face-to-face space, are we taking the time in our settings to give them the opportunity to learn from us, or are we actually becoming functional? Really important. And it's this sort of thing that seems tiny, but one of the things I will say time and time again, it looks so simple, but simple is never simple to a baby. It is brain building. And we need to provide it with the opportunities to be able to use those simplistic things to be able to build their development. Because if we give them the right environment, they will develop.
And when you talk about environment, what else do we need? What an ideal environment look like?
Okay, it starts with a loving, nurturing environment with a trusted, responsive adult, at least one. There's some fascinating research done by Dr. Bruce Perry on the first 60 days of life, where they looked at babies who had been born into chaos for the first 60 days, and then he looked at followed those same children through for the rest of life. They had a perfect life. They just had chaotic 60 days, the first 2 months. And then he compared those with another group of children who were born into a beautiful 60 days, and then they had complete chaos from there on in. And what they found was that those that were born into an amazing environment for the first 60 days, but the whole of the rest of their life that went on to be a complete disaster, fared better across all areas of life than those who just had 60 days of chaos and trauma, and then their whole life was fine. So it is finding this nurturing, safe space to land in life that is a very, very important thing. Building attachment of parents. So again, that's another reason why we start the Aliki app right at the beginning, and nurseries are sharing it with their parents at first look around, because we're building that attachment and that nurturing, not through, you need to love your baby. What does that even mean? But by beautiful little tiny activities of having, I don't know, spending the morning, getting some folded paper, making a black and white book, and putting that in your hospital bag so that you are reading your baby their first bedtime story in the world, and it's one that you wrote yourself. Now, how bonding is that as an activity? Totally simple to do, costs nothing, super easy. Nobody would think about it other than me to build it into the Aliki
Sounds
app.
beautiful. Sounds beautiful. Yeah.
But it's what a beautiful thing. You can keep it forever. And, you know, you put on Harry's little book, made by Mummy, with love on your first day in the world, and you put that in the keep cupboard. Oh my goodness, what an amazing thing to have. Exactly. And you are the author of their first bedtime story. But the connection that you've built in doing that tiny thing, just think about what that's doing to the loving, nurturing vibes that the baby is getting while they're tucked up inside and mum is creating that thing.
And how precious that will be later on in his life or her life when they open that box and they found that story to share with their children, and then it goes on and on.
And it's a beautiful, and you can see how this will become an intergenerational activity that people will do, and it'll all come back to the Aliki app. How amazing.
Exactly. Absolutely. And since you talked about this example of activity, can you give us maybe another few examples of activities?
Yeah, sure. So things like, if we go back to pregnancy, thinking about the baby in the future is really hard, because you're pregnant. You know, you're not going to have a teenager. You're pregnant. But thinking about what do you want for that baby in the future, beyond I want them to be happy, is sort of quite important. And that means having conversations with your partner. Like, what do they want? What do you want? For example, for my husband and I, politeness is like king in his world. If your kids aren't beyond polite, then you know, the whole world's fallen apart. For me, it was all about independence. I needed my children to be, you know, to be those kids who wanted to be independent and get going. It's backfiring. They've gone off and gone independent. It's like, you know, it's gone horribly wrong.
And then you don't want them to be independent. No, come back.
Now that you want them back.
Yeah. Anyway, but now what's happened is that so having those conversations as a couple, I wish we'd had them before the children arrived, because they caused a whole load of fights because we weren't on the same page. So having conversations early is a means of beginning to think about the outcomes later. Another activity, a bonding activity, spending time when the baby arrives and putting them on your chest, skin to skin, can have so many benefits, even down to developing gut bacteria and all the rest of it. I mean, it's like huge. But there's a bonding thing. It's a beautiful bonding experience for everybody, and should be done by both the partner and even potentially grandparents as early as possible and as often as possible. When you've got a toddler, you know, a bonding period thing is just sitting down and having a cuddle, having that time that's just calm. Have a cup of tea together. Toddler cup of tea. You know, that sort of like, shall we do tea? And toddlers love it if they get to do the same thing. And you can sit down and have a chat and that sort of thing. Just being together, getting in the same wavelengths, getting on the same vibe, getting in the same space and being together. going on a toddler walk in nature at their speed, looking at their thing that they're interested in without going on our speed, taking time. All of that becomes bonding, connecting time. And when we do that, what happens is we tune into them. And when we do that, we start observing closely. We listen to what the baby's saying. And we're on our leaky process.
I'm here just thinking about all the different scenarios and all the things that I already do with my partner. So like, okay, so I'm kind of on the right track at the moment. So I'm just like reflecting on myself even.
Well done, Tati.
And I have a 2-year-old niece. So I'm also thinking about how my sister is doing things and how my parents are involved. And I'm listening to you, Claire, and I'm kind of taking it all personally.
I hope. Giving yourself a big pat on the back, because a lot of this is not rocket science. A lot of this is you getting the stroke to say, hey, I did good, because there's nowhere in the world really, other than in the leaky space, it seems, where we praise the tiny wins and we're caught being good. And I love it when, I can't tell you how much I adore hearing from parents about their tiny wins. And by tiny wins, that might be, I cleaned my teeth this morning, right the way through to, I didn't lose it when my toddler did. And that the two ends of the massive spectrum. Or it broke my heart. I had one mum, one of my in fact, the very first person that bought the Aliki app was so generous with her time, and she spent a lot of time sharing with me her child's development over the years. And she wrote to me one day, she said, I'm so excited, I can't believe what's happened, and I put a lot of this down to the Aliki app. And I was like, okay, I'm interested. And it turned out that her child had to have a pediatric check, and as part of that check she'd had to list all the words and phrases that this child was able to say. And I think she was 14 months old, and she had 48 words and phrases that she confidently used consistently.
Wow.
And I thought, that's quite a lot. So I looked it up, and on average, it's 10. And by words and phrases, I was thinking, what do you mean? She said, I'm meaning things like, please change my nappy.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And I was like, and she's putting this down to what she's doing at home, because she is doing amazing stuff. But she also said the reason that she's doing a lot of this amazing stuff is because the Aliki app told her to not hold back and gave her the reason to do the things. And so she was introducing things that she would have introduced later, earlier, and just giving more repetition and more exposure to stuff. And it now was paying off. Now, the saddest part about this message from this parent, and I was blown away. I was really excited for the child's development and for her. But the saddest thing for me, the bit that broke my heart, was when she said, and I had to tell you because there's no one else I can tell because everybody thinks you're boasting.
Yep.
And that's so true. And that's when I decided that Aliki would be a space where I really want boasting. Like, come and tell me how great your kids are, but even better, come and tell me how great you are. Because I'm really proud of you, because those tiny wins are the wins that make you be interested in what you're doing and come back and do more of it, because you want to capture your child's success. And then you get that stroke. And that's why in the back of the Aliki app, there's the brain buckets that fill up over time, because that's your stroke that says, wow, I'm amazing, I'm top-tastic, this baby is brilliant because of what I am doing and the experiences I give, because we all thrive in an environment of success, and success breeds success. And that's babies and adults, practitioners, apprentices, managers. Everybody needs that praise, the court being good. And we're going to be the court being good space that says we're top-tastic and look at our babies because of what we do. Proud of me, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just wanted to ask you something that I caught in your last answer about looking at your child beyond the I want them to be happy. Because at the moment, it feels like this generation, the last at least 10 years that I've been consistently in childcare for the last 10 years, that's all that we see the parents my child can cry. My child can face challenges. I just want them to be happy. And we know that that's the biggest disservice that we're doing to the child. What are your views on it? And what can you share with us?
Okay. Learning happens from the things that go wrong. Consolidation happens when you prove that you can do it. You learn to really take into account what the driver in front of you at the roundabout is doing just after you've driven into the back of them.
Yep.
Not in the day that you didn't drive into. And that's the same for our babies. We need to give them challenge. And in that challenge, at times, they might be a bit frustrated. And that's our role, to manage that frustration. So we need to set challenge. We need to provide an environment in which they can grow, not an environment in which they can consolidate the fact that they know how to do the stuff. And we need to support and nurture them through the challenge so that there is just enough challenge to keep them interested. And the brain is excited by challenge and change and unique experiences. That doesn't mean that every single day needs to be something different. It means that today's unique experience is that I can't quite get that ball that's just out of sight. I'm frustrated, so I'm going to cry. My carer, my supporter, is going to bring it slightly closer or help me find the way that I can do it, and then give me success for today, so that tomorrow, when I come to then provide me with the environment tomorrow where I can redevelop that neural pathway and the muscle systems behind it that enable me to grow and develop in order to be able to reach the success that I'm craving. And it may take me time, but I'm primed for that because I'm primed to grow and develop. But I can only grow and develop in an environment where that is offered. If I'm cosseted and nurtured, if I'm put in a bucket, if I'm kept in a container, if I'm worn by mum all the time, I don't have that opportunity. So I don't grow my muscles. I don't grow my strengths. I don't grow my eyes connections. I don't get my sensory pathways working. I am not able to sit in a chair properly. I'm not able to hold my pencil properly. I can't run, jump, and play. I'm a bit floppy. All of those things come from the experience of challenge. And it's the same as if we then take that right the way out until they are in their 21st year and deciding what they're going to go and do. And they suddenly decide, I'm going to be a banker in the city. Well, okay, if that's what this person wants to go and do, great. But I suspect, I know nothing about being a banker, by the way, just plucked that one out of the sky. So hopefully bankers out there, I've got this right. I'm suspecting that as a banker or investment broker or whatever, you need to be a bit of a risk taker. You need to be prepared to take risk. The skill of being able to effectively take risk, to take risk that's measured and calculated, comes from the slide when you're little and your mum letting you climb the ladder without saying, be careful, be careful. No, that's too high, come down. Because we know our capabilities. When I was training to be a teacher, in my final teaching practice, I was in a team teaching classroom and we were doing, I think, 64 kids in the gym all at once. I mean, it was like a nightmare. They're all year ones and they were everywhere. It was like being in an ant house, it was like children everywhere. And the teacher that was working with me, because obviously got so many children, the teacher was with us, and the climbing frame was out. Those ones that come out from the wall bars that was out.
Yes.
And David, I can remember it so clearly. David shoots to the top of these wall bars. And I'm like, David, get down, that's too high. And the teacher came over to me, she went, never say that. You have just put David in danger. David knew he could do it. Do not put fear into David because you don't trust whether David can do it. David knows. David will only go as high as David is capable of going. So do not limit David's capabilities. And she was so right. David was like, wowie on those top bars. He was spinning around. David knew what his development needed.
How amazing that you had a teacher like that she actually pointed on that. That's amazing.
Amazing.
Quite the opposite of what we see nowadays.
Yeah. So who we become is built on the foundations of what we provide in these early days, in the first 1,000 days in our baby rooms. Who you're having in a toddler room is built on the foundations of the baby room you provide.
Part 2 is coming soon, so please stay tuned. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think about this episode. If you have any questions, and we can answer to you in the future episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.